My name's David Bales. I'm the head of the Fiduciary Risk team for MannionDaniels. Fraud, bribery and corruption can be viewed in a number of different ways. The definitions that we in MannionDaniels rely on the most are: fraud is an intentional act of dishonesty by one or more individuals with the intent of making a gain for themselves or someone else, or inflicting a loss on another. And corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. In line with many donors, MannionDaniels operates a zero-tolerance approach towards fraud, bribery and corruption, and so we don't accept any level of offence within the organisation. However, we do have to recognise that we operate in a high corruption risk environment. The countries we operate in are extremely high risk, so it's very important to us that we have proper processes, systems in place to prevent fraud, bribery and corruption as far as we possibly can. Everyone has responsibility for doing their part to reduce fraud, bribery and corruption. It doesn't matter what your role is, you should always be aware of the policies and procedures we have in place and should be observant of the organisations and third parties you work with to reduce fraud, bribery and corruption as far as possible. More specifically, the requirements we place on consultants are awareness and compliance with MannionDaniels policies on fraud, bribery and corruption, awareness and compliance with our policies on expenses, conflicts of interest and gifts. All employees should take seriously and report any suspicions of potential fraud to the Fiduciary Risk team. And finally, everyone should be aware of the risk and remain vigilant in their dealings with other organisations. There's a number of ways in which you can report an incident of fraud. Firstly, the preferred method is through your manager or through your technical lead. So all consultants should first speak to their technical lead at MannionDaniels if they wish to report a fraud. If they feel that's not appropriate, or if they prefer to report through another route, then you can always report it directly to members of the Fiduciary Risk team. Either myself or any of my other team members are happy to speak to you about any potential cases of fraud and take the investigation of the case forward. Finally, we do have an anonymous whistleblowing service which is hosted by an external provider called ExpoLink. If you wish to report anonymously, then you can go to either the MannionDaniels website or any of the websites for the funds which we manage, and you can make an anonymous report there. We would, however, encourage everyone to report with their name, as it makes investigation of cases a lot easier. And finally, I should say that all reports must be made immediately upon a suspicion arising, and they shouldn't wait for confirmation or proof that the fraud has taken place. Within the fraud, bribery and anti-corruption policy, there's some examples of red flags given. These are things such as the consultant becomes aware that a third party engages in or has been accused of engaging in improper business practices. This is something that you should be aware of and should bring up with your Fiduciary Risk team. Another example of a red flag would be if the consultant learns that a third party has a reputation for paying bribes or requiring that bribes are paid to them, or has a reputation for a special relationship with foreign government officials. Again, this is something to flag up as a key risk. I'd advise all consultants to read through the fraud, bribery and anti-corruption policy in addition to watching this video, as it gives a lot more detail and depth of understanding as to what our policies and procedures are. It is something that we require everyone to be familiar with.